Did you know that 1/3 of Americans believe in faith healing? However, faith healing is a dangerous practice that preys on the vulnerable and sick, often leading them away from effective medical treatment. Believing that prayer or a divine touch can cure serious illnesses can result in tragic outcomes, as individuals may delay or completely forego necessary medical interventions. This reliance on faith over science can exacerbate conditions, cause unnecessary suffering, and even lead to preventable deaths. Moreover, faith healers often exploit their followers financially, promising miraculous cures that never materialize. It's crucial to recognize that while faith can provide comfort, it should never replace evidence-based medical care. Lives depend on the responsible and informed pursuit of real, scientifically based healthcare solutions. But if you think you can make a case for faith healing, then give us a call because the show is starting now. Welcome, everybody. Today is July 7th, 2024. I'm your host, Dr. Ben, and joining me today is Secular Spirit. How are you doing today?
Hello. How's it going?
It's a good Sunday. I know we kind of had the holiday weekend over here, but I'm happy to see everybody ready to go for a show today. But if you'd like to share with the audience kind of who you are and what you do, I'm sure some people have seen you on other shows, but we'd love to introduce you to our audience here.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure. Oh, hold on. I think I'm having a sound issue on my end. Hold on a second. Aha. There we go. All right, figured it out. So my background is Muslim. I grew up in the Middle East, in the Gulf region, in Dubai specifically. And I spent the first 16, 17 years of my life being a very adamant practicing believer. And when I moved to Canada for university when I was 17, I basically went through this whole big existential crisis, which I guess is common to a lot of teenagers of what am I doing with my life? What is my purpose? Why am I even going to school? Why did I make this big move halfway across the world? And it kind of sent me on this process of questioning everything about my life. Like, what do I want to do with my life? And what are the foundations of my life? And I think a combination of that crisis and just being in this new environment where I was no longer in the Muslim world, no longer surrounded by Muslims and meeting new people, different kinds of people of different faiths, it sent me questioning the things that I'd never questioned before in my life, and that was Islam. And I just realized I didn't have good reasons to believe, and I just been believing because that's what everyone around me was telling me was the truth. And so I became an atheist pretty much then and there when I was around 17, 18, and didn't really think about religion or faith that much anymore. It just wasn't part of my life. And what eventually happened was I realized that there were a lot of people who were really suffering in silence because they had left the religion. I was fortunate enough where my family accepted that I had left, my immediate family anyway. A lot of my extended family doesn't know till this day, and they definitely don't know that I'm doing this kind of stuff online. And I just realized that I had this responsibility to amplify the voices of former Muslims, ex-Muslims, because the punishment for leaving Islam, besides burning in hell, which is what a lot of Muslims believe, is punishment of death, which isn't enforced that much, thankfully, especially not in the West, but it does happen to a lot of people. A lot of ex-Muslims are disowned by their family. They lose their jobs. They're jailed. And I figured I'm here in Canada, and I don't have the same risks that a lot of Muslims do. I don't have to worry about my family finding out. And here's the other important thing. I noticed that a lot of people who criticize Islam, like let's talk about the new atheists, they're dismissed. Their criticisms of Islam are dismissed because Muslims will say, well, they didn't grow up with the religion, they're Westerners. And I felt like as an Arab, as someone who lived the religion, that I think my criticisms hold more weight, especially within the Muslim community. And that's what led me to starting this channel, Secular Spirit. And I called it Secular Spirit because I want to explore faith in general, not just Islam, but the reasons why we need faith, the things that we get from faith, what the problems are with organized religion, and what we can do to replace the things that religion give us without needing to rely on blind faith.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love that we have people like you bringing this kind of perspective to many of us in the West who haven't had a lot of exposure to Islam. And I know we have a very Christian-centric focus because of our upbringing, but understanding that humans all have very similar fallacies that we're prone to, similar biases, even across culture. And so I really appreciate what you're doing in this space. And I'm excited to hear what you bring to the conversations today.
Thank you.
So Talk Heathen is a product of the atheist community of Austin, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. This is a live call-in show, so get your calls in now. So we get plenty of time to talk with you about your religious experiences, your experiences with faith healing, any fun stories you want to share from growing up in Islam or in Christianity. We'd love to hear from you. We also love to address any particular points of contention that we might have across different beliefs. So get your calls in at 512-991-9242, or you can go to your browser, type in tiny.cc/callth, and we would love to hear from you. But first, we have a fun segment, Talk Heathen to Me, and we're going to go through the comments that we received from last week's question. And our question last time was, when you go to hell, who is the first person you want to talk to? And our answer in third place is from Coco B. The first person I talked to in hell, Frigidaire HVAC installation specialist. Good one. And in second place, we have Miranda Rensberger, says the first person I want to talk to in hell is Mother Teresa, because if Christianity was real, she's definitely there, and I have some things to say to her about what it means to care for the sick. And that is a burn.
That is a really good choice too.
And in first place, we have from X Million. They say, in hell, I'd want to talk to my alter ego. God damn it, Tim, I warned you about staying away from absinthe. All really good responses. So if you want your name and response to be featured on next week's show, we're going to give you another question, which is, what would Jesus tweet? So answer your question below in the comment section, and we'll pick our top 3 responses and read them live on next week's show. But Secular Spirit, what is your answer to this? What do you think Jesus would tweet?
Ooh, I was thinking about a good one for this, but I first just wanted to say, I think the fitting punishment for the HVAC repairman is to be given a 6-hour time window when the customer is going to be there for the repair, but they never show up for eternity.
That's hilarious.
So yeah, I was thinking of a few things and I came up with this. So this is Jesus's tweet. The most important question about Jesus, of course, is when is he coming back? We've been waiting and waiting for thousands of years now. So Jesus wanted to address this by posting, Messiah return update, running a bit late, but don't worry, I've got eternity on my side. Hashtag second coming soon-ish.
I love it. You know, and he would do something like that. He would definitely...
Oh, he's a tease. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, he would bait that over and over again. But if anybody else has answers to this, what would Jesus tweet? Answer in the comments section and watch next week to see if yours was chosen. And we can't do the show without some very, very important people behind the scenes. So let's go to the crew cam. We have our audio crew, our video crew, people that do the stamps for the recordings and the call screeners. We have so many people behind the scenes doing a lot of work that goes into this type of show. And we are incredibly grateful to these lovely, lovely people. So what do you think about taking a call?
Let's do it.
All right. So we're going to take Van, he, him from California. Van, it sounds like you want to talk about philosophy. Can you summarize your argument or your question?
Sure. I just in conversations with theists I've had, and just to let you know, I'm a agnostic atheist, and I come across this argument a lot from theists about the ontological existence of God, or using ontological arguments, like Anselm's writings, Descartes' writings, things like that. And so I wanted to get your thoughts on how you would approach responding or rebutting to these arguments. I brought up, question begging and things like that, but I just want to hear what you guys have to say.
Yeah, do you have any specific argument? Other than we know these people have a very specific way of phrasing the argument, but have you had in your encounters had a specific argument that was brought to you?
Yeah. One that I had recently, a person said that basically the mind is perfect, and let's see if I can remember it. It was a bit esoteric. The mind is perfect, therefore anything that the mind can conceive of then is conceivably perfect, therefore God exists because God is perfect. I think I'm...
Yeah, that's a garbage argument.
Yeah, it is. And so this is what I said. I just said, okay, so what if somebody just objects to your basic premise, and it's question begging? What if that's the basic objection? And he said, well, that's silly. And so I just kind of rubbed my temples, a little bit, but and so at this point I just okay, whatever. But again, I wanted to hear kind of some of your thoughts on that. Now I've heard other things, a person came on, I talked about Anselm's arguments. And when I kind of tried to approach it from an epistemological sense, they were like, well, that's not the same thing, because you can't approach the concept of God from an epistemological sense because you're relying on empirical evidence. You can't rely on empirical evidence. I'm like, okay, well then if you can't rely on empirical evidence, then what else can you compare it to? So, and I tried different ways like leprechauns, unicorns, and it was always not the same thing. So again, I wanted to hear your thoughts.
Secular Spirit, do you want to go first?
Well, sure. Thank you for the question, by the way, Van. And I see why you wanted to ask it, because for me personally, this is the hardest argument I've dealt with when talking to theists. And the reason why is because a lot of it is just kind of, mental gymnastics, really abstract thinking. And what I found to be an effective communication method to talk to theists about this is that when you think about arguments like this, you don't actually know anything about what this God entity is. And I don't know why you would even want to call it God. This God has no characteristics, no traits. You could substitute in the word the universe, for example, and you couldn't really argue with them. So if you're, say, talking to a Christian, the question I would ask is, how can you connect, let's say this is true, this ontological experiment is true, thought experiment. How can you connect this God to the God of Christianity? If you're talking to a Muslim, the God of Islam. Clearly, you still need to do a lot of work. And the best someone like, for example, William Lane Craig will do is, well, this is what we mean by God when we think about the greatest possible thing. And then he sneaks in all these specific traits and characteristics about him in separate arguments.
I see. So, in other words, are you saying something to the effect of, okay, well, this perfect being that you're talking about ontologically, what other characteristics does this being have? Could it conceivably be evil?
And how do you know that these characteristics exist? Precisely. Like, there's no reason to think that this being cares about us. What could be completely indifferent, let alone being evil. Could be neutral, not loving or evil. We just don't know.
Okay. Yeah, I see. Yeah. I thought about that. You know, how you run through a conversation later in your head. You know, oh, I should have said this. I should have said that, and I kind of had that thought as well.
No, definitely. I think when it comes to a lot of theists, especially the ones that have looked into the apologetics, they're coming in from a position where they already believe whatever faith they're professing, and there might be like this element of insecurity about like, well, how do I know it's true? And then they find things like this to support their argument. And again, what I would say to a Christian, let's say, a Muslim can use the same exact argument for their God. And someone could just invent a religion and use the same argument. Well, this is what I mean by God, this perfect being that we can't conceive of something being greater than it. So how do we know which God is real? Like how do we connect this entity to a God that tells you that there's certain things you can't eat on Sundays or Fridays or whatever, or, well, according to Muslims, you can't eat pork. There's like a big missing gap between the ontological argument God and the God that people actually believe in.
Yeah, and what I found also is that the leap usually goes to, well, you know, it goes to the something, or the nothing from something argument, or the something from nothing argument. It usually goes to that. And
definitely.
So again, that's, like you were saying, it's kind of a leap. Yeah, it's a leap. And so it normally just shifts, the goalposts just kind of shift, and then it's just so I think that's what I am, like you said, it's a pretty hard argument to really, it's really like it's like a greased pig, you know. They're just really, it's a really slippery argument, and it's really, really hard to kind of nail them down on something. And that's really what I'm trying to do.
Oh, Ben, we can't hear you.
Thanks. Pulled the Johnny today. But with regard to your initial argument, not your argument, but the argument that you were responding to, with the mind being perfect, I flat out reject that premise, and I'm sure you do as well. And it'd be pretty easy to kind of help them understand that. Like, there are definitely times that the mind can conceive something that is flawed. And we see this on a day-to-day basis. I mean, even every time that you lose your keys, when you think for sure you placed them in the same place that you always do, but then you find them on the counter instead of, in your bag. And you were sure that you had left them in the right place, but your brain was not perfect. Your mind was not perfect in remembering what it did. And there are plenty of things that we theoretically come up with and we'll do thought experiments about, but they don't actually translate to reality. And that's why bench research is so important, and why you can't just get theoretical degrees only. And we don't just base medical treatments on theory. We have to have live demonstration of these things, and even how we need in vivo data and not just in vitro data. You can conceptualize whatever you want, but that doesn't mean that reality is going to reciprocate in like going along with the theory. And so it's just a flawed premise to begin with. And I'm sure all of us are on the same page with that piece.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think when we think of words like perfection, it's ultimately subjective, like tied to the whole concept of, beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah, and that's not to say that. Yeah. Oh, go for it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say what
No,
I'm
go for it.
focused on is just how slippery it all gets with, as far as, it's basically different things like, well, that's not the same thing. Like if I brought up things like, well, we can't apply real world situations to God, because God is immaterial and things like that. And you're talking about material things. It just gets really, bogged down, and it just gets super, super slippery.
Yeah. And if God influences material things, then we should be able to materially demonstrate. Because if they're going to make the claim that it's purely immaterial, then what's the point in even doing anything with him? Because if he's not going to influence the material world, then fine. Then we're in like we're in a completely different realm of like an impersonal, like deism situation. But even the deist God, like, was at least a creator, at least in most of the deistic theology that I'm familiar with, is that at least the deist God has intervened with our material reality in some way. And so even that's not really immune to this thing. So I think we're all on the same page here.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, without a doubt. But yeah, I just wanted to hear kind of how you would approach this, just to see where you land on it. And I kind of feel like I'm at least in the same ballpark as you. So
for sure. Like the one thing I would say, Van, is I find that the best approach is to not tell or dictate things to theists you're having these kinds of discussions with, but to just ask them questions. For me personally, it's a curiosity to see how they justify it for themselves, whatever their belief happens to be. And I think when you ask questions that really get to the things that you think don't make sense, it gets them thinking about it too, even if they might deny it on the spot, but it could get them thinking later on or the next day, the way you said you sometimes think about things you should have said.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think one of the biggest things I read was avoid facts. Just keep asking questions.
Yeah, that makes sense. I totally agree with that.
All right. Anything else we can help you with today, Van?
Guys, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for calling in. I hope you have a good rest of your Sunday, and I hope to hear some updates on how these conversations go.
Yeah, please let us know.
Oh yeah, for sure. Okay, yeah, I'll come back in and let you guys know. Thanks again. Have a good day.
All right. That was a great starting call for us. But I have a very exciting announcement that I want to tell you all about, because it's getting closer. It is getting very close, actually, as it's now July. But the annual Bat Cruise is happening August 24th, and some very fantastic people are going to be there, including Forrest Valkai, J. Mike, Secularity, and as long as my leave is approved, I should be there as well, and I'm very excited. So if you want to get in on that, hang out on the water with some of your favorite hosts and some other community members that will also be in attendance, please get your tickets at tiny.cc/batcruise. And you can find all of the information listed there. But even if you're not able to go to the Bat Cruise, you can support the channel and the ACA in many other ways, including becoming a channel member. You can hit the join button below this video and you'll get some custom emotes, and you'll get early access to clips and shorts, and you'll help us perpetuate the mission of Talk Heathen and help us reach a wider audience and help the atheist community of Austin continue our mission in promoting secular humanism and skepticism. You can also send a super chat, which we will read on the air live during the show. And if you have a question or comment that you want us to address, but you don't really have the confidence to call in, or if you don't have the audio set up, you can always send a super chat and we will address those as well. You can, if you're unable to financially support, you can like the video, and subscribe to the channel. Enable notifications so you're here every week when we're live, and also share out these videos. Leave comments, comment in the side chat. All of your engagement is very helpful and much appreciated. And finally, we also have some pretty amazing merch at tiny.cc/merchaca. And now we have pins and backpacks, onesies, and youth t-shirts. So you can take your baby into public and show everybody that you are not dedicating your child to Jesus in the church like maybe you're expected to. But you can put them in a very, very nice Talk Heathen onesie. And that's, maybe a little bit better than bringing your kid to church. So I wish, I don't have a child to give a onesie to, but maybe I could put my cat in one, or maybe that's cruel. I don't know. Tell me in the comments what you think about me putting my cat in a Talk Heathen onesie. Oh, and we had somebody, David Haxor, her name, gifted 20 Talk Heathen memberships. Thank you so much for that contribution. That's very, very generous of you. And Secular Spirit, you ready for another call?
Let's do it. I'm ready.
Alrighty. I think I've talked to this person before. Let's talk with Annie from Canada. Annie, it sounds like you want to talk about what caused the universe. Can you tell us the summary of your question?
Actually, I wanted to, first of all, nice to speak with you again. What I wanted to talk about was a little bit of what you spoke about with the first caller. And what was said was that Christians can't close the gap between the first cause and their God, which is true that ontological arguments don't do that. But atheists still need to concede that the universe was caused. If the argument, the cosmological argument specifically, is sound, or disprove it. And atheists seem resistant to doing that for some reason.
So Annie, I just want to jump in and say that I do not claim that the universe was not caused. I don't really know any people who make that claim. I'm sure there's possibly some out there, but I do not claim that the universe was not caused. I just do not accept that there was a supernatural cause to the universe. And I don't necessarily know what this natural cause would be. I'm not a physicist, and there's a lot more that I need to learn about this, but that's not me saying that there is no cause. It's just I would much more easily accept a natural cause as opposed to a supernatural cause. Does that make sense?
What you're saying makes sense. I understand your argument. Am I allowed to respond to that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, to ask for a natural cause of the universe, what does that mean? Because the universe is everything that is natural. So to ask for a natural cause to everything that is natural is to ask for the universe to bring itself into existence, or at least...
No, not necessarily.
Yeah.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
I'm a little bit curious, turning the question around to you. What makes you say that the universe had to have been caused by a supernatural cause? How did you get there?
Well, I just explained. It's impossible since the universe is all that is natural, everything that we know and can ever know, then to suggest that something or a quality of the universe is the cause of the universe is just a logical impossibility. It's not a real idea. It makes sense in English as a sentence, but logically it doesn't make any sense.
Secular Spirit, it looked like you wanted to jump in a second ago.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, Annie. I'm also in Canada, by the way. I'm in Toronto. Thanks for calling and asking this question. It's a really good one, and what I always think about is when it comes to these big kinds of questions, I just adopt the approach of, well, I don't really know. There might be a lot of things that are beyond our knowledge currently. We might figure them out eventually. And you could be right. Maybe there isn't anything within our observable universe that created the universe, but we don't really know. We can't rule out there being something beyond our observable experience. There might be something that is natural, but we don't understand that it's natural. And where I get stuck is, so you said that it's impossible logically for the universe to create itself. I don't know what a supernatural cause could be, what domain it exists in, if we could even say that it exists in a domain. So it almost seems an abstract, meaningless thing that would also be impossible to say that there's something outside of nature. And I don't know how to bridge that gap.
Well, I guess it's just something you understand or you don't understand, because you can't bring something, for something to do anything, it has to already exist. So something can't bring it.
That's not the case. That's not the case, though. That's not the case, though, because we know things emerge from combinations of other things. This is the case with a lot of even different elements, different minerals. Many different natural things did not originally start out that way. They started from something that was not those things. And so I think that's a problematic argument to make, that something would have already had to exist. It's just like when we get arguments about consciousness, I don't believe that consciousness was something that already existed. It was an emergent property of having chemical and physical activity within a brain. And no, we can't necessarily explain the minutia of how all of that happens. We're working towards further understanding. But I don't accept that premise that something had to have already existed in order to make something different or make something else.
Well, the difference between the universe and objects or elements of the universe, let me start again. It is not accurate to compare the first cause of the universe to atoms of. I'm so sorry. Just give me a second.
No worries. Take your time, please.
Yeah. Thank you. I just don't. Yes, there are elements and chemicals that come from elements and chemicals, but those things are all part of the universe. We're talking about what created everything. Think what was the cause of everything, not what was the cause of.
Yeah, and I think this is where we have a difference. The fact that you seem to need to have a concrete answer to this question, and I don't. I don't have an exact answer for what caused the beginning of the universe, and I'm willing to admit that. I don't understand how you get to this needs to be something supernatural, and that you have an answer for this question, when I'm not convinced that there's one answer to this question. There's so many unknown variables here. And it sounds like you want an answer and are more interested in having an answer than kind of looking more into it and wondering what we could be missing with trying to find an answer to this.
Well, I'm not sure about that. I don't think that's what my intentions are. To go back to what I was saying before, we understand that nothing comes from nothing. Everything comes from something. That is.
How did you get to that? How did you get to that claim? Especially if you're saying that we understand this. How did you come to that understanding?
How did I come to the understanding of what? Please ask like a specific question.
Yeah, the understanding that something has to come from something and that nothing could come from, like something can't come from nothing. How did you get to that understanding?
It's nothing. It's a foundational truth. Nothing.
How do you know that? How do you know that it's a foundational truth? Are you pulling a common sense argument? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that it's like A is equal to A. There is no, A is equal to A. So something is equal to something and nothing is equal to nothing. So nothing comes from nothing. There is no, it's just.
That's not it. That's not, you're making two different arguments here. So something coming into existence is not the same thing as an argument of A equals A. You're using an identity argument and then trying to talk about things coming from other things. So something coming from something else is a process. And so that's different distinctly from an equation that is an identity. And so I think what's happening here, you're trying to like what you're essentially communicating to me right now is that you have this understanding that you believe is fundamental understanding to just how the universe works and how the world works. But the problem is we disagree on it. And so we can't go back and say that this is a fundamental thing that we all understand because we don't agree on it. So I need to know, why are we in disagreement? How did you get to this and we didn't? Because just saying this is just something that we all know that's not going to convince me that you're correct here.
Okay. So you said that nothing is an identity. What is that? That is nothing. So nothing is an identity. Nothing is equal to nothing. I don't how you get something from nothing when nothing is nothing. It does nothing. It's nothing.
So I don't know how much math background you have, but if we were to make an equation, it's very easy to say nothing equals nothing because we've assigned terms to either side of the equation, but understand that when we add bigger equations or when we're trying to make proofs that something can lead to something else, you have other variables there. And so when we manipulate those variables through addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, et cetera, adding other variables, adding powers of 2, powers of 3, et cetera, when we manipulate that, we are no longer in A equals A. We have a situation where A could equal X plus Y to the fourth, like oversimplifying that process to an identity equation is not proving necessarily what you're suggesting it does. And so I get that this is an analogy and not meant to be kind of taking one for one, like as an equivocal situation, but it's not as effective of an analogy because we're not dealing with single variable equations. We're dealing with a lot of variables, and things can transform as you do proofs, as you add more variables. And so we're missing the dynamics of this question. You have a very static analogy trying to be used to communicate a dynamic reality. And so I think that's where we're kind of missing this, but I need to know how you're getting to this point. Secular Spirit, do you want to weigh in at all?
No, I just want to give the space for Annie to just respond.
Yeah.
Well, how do you know there are a lot of variables? And can you tell me what those variables are?
I can't, and that's the thing. We know some variables. We don't know all of them. And I don't know if we can know all of them. And so that's why it's difficult for me to say we have an answer on what caused the universe, because there's so many more variables that we can even account for. And that's what you get into with astrophysics and with these experts who know a lot more than I do. They've been working their entire lives to account for these variables, and they find more variables. And it's the same thing with any subject matter. It's the same thing with human biology that I've been studying for a long time. There's always more variables that come up, and we do the best that we can with applying what we know currently, because some variables we don't really need to know to help somebody, get over their pneumonia. I know enough variables to address that. But with something so complex and so far removed as the origin of the universe, we don't have enough knowledge to really make any claim about it, other than we need to learn more. And I'm not convinced that there's a specific answer right now that we can point to.
Well, how is it useful to talk about anything if we must assume there are an infinite number of unknown variables to every question?
Well, and that's what we have to, that's kind of the nuance of it, is what's the utility of what we're arguing, and how are we using that information? And in this case, I would say, for the most part, arguing the origins of the universe really is not super useful. In general, it's not getting us a whole lot of places to have those discussions. However, it does matter when people are claiming that the origin of the universe is a supernatural being that influences your day-to-day life and tells you who you can marry, where you can live, how you live your life. And that does matter. So that's why we have these conversations. And that's why I take up these arguments, because people are using their answer to make other claims. But otherwise, if we didn't have that issue, I wouldn't need to debate this at all.
Okay, so in your view, it's not useful to debate the origins of the universe. It's only a problem that people have an opinion on the origins of the universe.
That is my perspective. There are other people who study the origins of the universe that might say that there are scientific applications to helping our planet with fuel sources, et cetera. They have probably some other reasons why they would argue this. This is purely my perspective. I personally do not think it's very useful in the things that I'm needing to discuss.
I don't know, that just sounds very, I don't understand then why you invite debate if you're not.
Oh no, we do invite, and that's what I just mentioned. We value this kind of debate because you are using this to justify the existence of a supernatural being who then makes decisions about my life. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people being hurt by this rhetoric. And that is the reason why we're arguing this. Secular Spirit, do you want to?
I got it.
Well, I just wanted to add this other point, the risk that comes with the claims from some believers that their God created the universe, was the origin, the first cause of the universe, is if we feel like we already have the answer, well, it was God, then it could stop us from delving into, if you want to call it, the mysteries of the universe, learning more about the universe around us, its underpinnings, how it works. And it could actually stop us from searching, figuring out potentially the actual answer to this question, instead of the one that theists just give us without much evidence. So it does have that potential cost too. It's hard to quantify what it is, but it is a risk.
Okay.
So I guess the question for you.
Ben, can I actually ask her a question?
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
Annie, I just wanted to ask you a question. Is it important for you to know that there was a first cause, a God who created the universe, as opposed to just not accepting that maybe we don't know the answer? Is it important to you that you have an answer to that question?
It's not a matter of importance. It's the fact that the question exists and there is an answer. It doesn't matter if the question is important or not. The question can be asked. It's been asked for all of history. I've asked it, and there is an answer. So you're saying there is no answer, or there's no point in searching for the answer.
No, not at all.
Right.
We just don't know.
We're just saying we don't know. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I want the answer to that question too, and you're right. There has to be some answer that I just feel like we don't have access to it yet, and we might never have access to it.
Okay, but once again, if we leave the possibility that we may never have access to the answer, then the discussion, as Dr. Ben put it, is pointless.
Well, no, it's not like the possibility of never having an answer isn't a reason to just give up and not look for answers.
Agreed.
It's like we may never fully understand, like from medicine, we may not fully understand every single condition that can happen to the human body, but that doesn't mean that we should just quit now and let people die. Like that's not what we should be doing. And so I think this discussion, maybe we need to continue next time you call in, just because there's a lot of depth here, and I think we've covered some ground.
Just one more thing, please. Please, just one more thing.
Yeah, no, go for it.
Thank you so much. I think what I was trying to say when I asked my previous question, when I made my previous statement that the discussion is pointless, is that now I, as a theist, feel calling into this show is pointless, because whenever you meet an objection that you can't refute, you just say, well, maybe there are unknown variables. Like, what's the point of me calling in if you're just going to escape through the roof?
Well, see, that's my question. Like, how are you so confident that there is an answer and that the answer is your answer? How did you, like, I guess let me ask that. How confident, on a scale of 0% to 100%, how confident are you that your answer is correct?
I am confident there is an answer regardless of whether or not my answer is correct. And we can have a discussion to find the answer which requires us having faith that there is an answer. But if we always say there are unknown variables that we may never know the answer, then there can never be a discussion. There's no point in—
That's not true. That's not true, though. That's not true.
Well,
yeah, and I disagree with that for the reasons I already mentioned, that not having an ultimate end answer does not mean that the entire discussion is pointless. And I think it is problematic to jump to a conclusion that might not be correct. Like, if you're saying that whether or not your answer is correct, I think it's okay to think that there is an answer. And we agree with you that—
I'm willing to accept too, that there has to be an answer.
We will concede that there is an answer. We just don't agree that your answer is correct. And so that's where our disagreement is. And so we're trying to get at what made you confident that your answer is the correct one. That's what we're asking.
Okay, I'm answering. Because I assume that there are no unknown variables that I have to consider. So
how do you know that that assumption is correct?
That's where you and I differ. I am a theist, so I believe in God. That means I believe in truth. You're an atheist. You don't believe in God, therefore you don't believe in truth.
Oh, so if you don't believe in God, you don't believe in truth. So I want to know how you got to that point. How did you get to the point that God is truth?
It's because the creator of the universe would be the source of everything that we know. Therefore, it would be truth.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that would be the case if your assumption is correct. So you're automatically assuming that you're correct and then making your decision based on the assumption that you're correct.
Right.
Doesn't that sound to you a bit overly confident in your answer?
Well, I guess that's
is there any margin of error for you at all?
Yes. I can be wrong about a whole bunch of things, but I know I can be wrong because I know that I can also be true. I can also be right. You don't know if you can be right or wrong.
No, but if you just assume that you're right, like if I say, let's say, going back to math, if 2 + 2 = 4, but I say, you know what, I'm just going to assume that 2 + 2 = 7. And if you don't believe that, then you're wrong. Would I be reasonable to, and if I made every decision in math based on that assumption, does that mean that I'm correct just because I've asserted that?
Of course not, but we know that.
So I would have to justify how I got there. You can't justify how you got there just by saying, I know that this is true because it is, and that I know I can be wrong about other things because I know I can be true. But the thing that you have that is true is something that you just asserted was true. I'm not yet convinced that you've demonstrated that your truth is true.
You and I both know that 2 + 2 = 4. So that's why you're wrongly comparing my argument to 2 + 2 = 7. You haven't shown that my argument is like 2 + 2 = 7.
And you haven't shown that your God is true.
Ben, if I could make a point too. Annie, if I could just make this one point, the challenge, I see where you're coming from in terms of believing that, you believe in God and this God is the truth. The challenge for me is, how do I know your specific God is the truth and not some other theist's version of God, version of truth? Like, I grew up Muslim, and there's a lot of key ways where the Islam's God and Christianity's God are not compatible. There's direct contradictions with some parts of the beliefs that Muslims and Christians have. So who has access to the truth here?
So you don't need to believe my God is true. You just need to believe that God is truth. The creator of the universe, the source of everything that we can know, would be truth. My God has nothing to do with it. The creator of the universe would have to be truth itself.
I think, and with that, yeah, I think we need to move on. But for the next time that you call, I want us to pick up from how we got to the assumption that God is truth, because we're not convinced, and it's not something that we're going to assume is correct. You have to demonstrate to us why that point is correct. And so I think we'll move on for today, but please call in again with that argument, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for calling in.
Thank you for calling in, Annie. But yeah, Ben, you could see why I asked that question, because when we have theists talking about having access to the truth, when it's abstract like that, I actually don't really mind it. It's kind of harmless. But to your point about how these kinds of things actually harm people, it's when you have someone, I'm not saying this about Annie to clarify, but let's say a theist believes that LGBTQ people are against the order of nature, and that is part of the truth of God, then that's where the risk is, because you might encounter another theist who doesn't feel that way. So how do we know which theist has access to this actual truth?
Absolutely.
We don't.
Yeah, and that is why we have these discussions, and some of the topics seem frivolous, but that is what we get to these arguments, and it's super important to make sure that we're addressing these appropriately. And with that, we have the time of the show where we talk about our patrons. And if you want to get your name on this list, you can go to our Patreon and sign up. And this list changes every week. So our top 5 patrons of the week, we have Dingleberry Jackson, Oops All Singularity, Devor Valgin, Kalevi Helveti, Left in the Leaves, and our honorable mention is Kat. So congratulations to our top 5 of the week. And we have a couple super chats that I want to read as well. We have One from Nash, 5 Canadian, says, Annie was such a good caller. These are very good ideas and questions to be asked. Was such a good conversation. Ben and Secular Spirit, good show so far. Thank you so much for your support and your super chat. And then we have Miranda Rensberger, who's been a member for 2 months, says, gives $5 and says, making up an answer is not the same thing as finding the answer. Absolutely. Any thoughts about that?
Well, also just feeling or having faith that you have the answer is not the same as it being the actual answer. Like you need to find a way in which to determine it to be true with some sort of evidence. And for me, faith is not enough.
Yeah, absolutely. For the next call, let's take Michelle, she, her from California. It sounds like you want to talk about near-death experiences. Tell us your story.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, what's your experience? I'm excited to hear about it.
So this was in the late 1970s when I was a teenager. I had a pretty serious event and had a couple of surgeries. And during one of the surgeries, had an adverse outcome. Had a near-death experience, which I didn't know about at the time, of course, but I did have kind of a weird experience while I was in surgery, and had this weird kind of dreamlike state while I was under anesthesia. And later on found out that I had a near-death experience, and I thought, oh, okay, that's what that was. Now, I was raised secular, which was unusual in the 70s, but the experience was not religious at all. It was black and white, kind of like Keystone Cops, like, you know, a train was coming on the tracks and I was trying to get a car off the tracks, and then I woke up in the recovery room. I didn't know about NDEs back then. Wasn't until I was, went through medical school, went through residency and all of that. And then I learned, oh, okay, these are a thing. And your brain probably makes these up later. And then religion started saying, all this kind of so I just wanted to let people know that not all of these are religious. Not all of these are people that, drop to their knees and, accept Allah or Jesus or whoever, Vishnu. Some of us have them and, go on about our lives. And honestly, I rarely ever thought about it. Really until I started watching a lot of atheist content on YouTube, to be honest. So I just kind of wanted to push back on some of the religious people saying that, near-death experiences prove God.
Yeah, that's amazing. Did you say you're in residency? What specialty?
I started off in family medicine, and then I switched to psychiatry.
Oh, amazing. I'm actually working on switching from family medicine to internal medicine. So I'll be joining the switcheroo club.
Yeah, I'm actually probably going to retire in maybe another 5-6 years. I'm at the end of my career. You're at the beginning. So.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing, though, that we have some secular psychiatrists out there that are doing some amazing work. And of course, I don't know you personally, but I know in a field that can be very heavily influenced by religion. Happy to hear that there's some secular folk doing some good work.
We're actually pretty secular as a whole. Psychiatrists and neurologists tend to be pretty secular. But yeah, this was my near-death experience. I was a teenager. This was back in the 70s. And NDEs, people have been experiencing these for a long time. People didn't, tend to popularize this quite a lot back then. Nobody made a big deal out of it or a big fuss. And it wasn't really until maybe the 80s or 90s that I started hearing about it. And that's when I started thinking about it. I thought, oh, yeah, I had that experience. Mine was not religious. It was, you know, like I said, it was like an old black and white movie. And honestly, I never really thought about it until religious people kind of co-opted it. And then I started thinking about it a little bit more. And I thought, you know what, I'll call and tell you about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you have any tips, I guess, for people engaging with these kinds of arguments? Any particular things that you've said to people that have maybe brought this up to you?
About NDEs specifically?
Yeah, have you had any discussions with people who believe that they are supernatural experiences? And if so, are there any discussion, like any kind of methods of discussion that you've used in talking with them?
So if it's a patient, I don't ever push back on patients and what they believe. Mm-hmm. If it's like in a setting or you know, family or friends, it depends. And if I am going to push back on a family member or a friend, I tend to use Socratic approaches with folks. Well, why do you believe that, and what methods do you use to determine the, you know, how you know what the truth claim, you know, how do you know that that's true? You know, how would you test that? Things like that. And if they, you know, get kind of squirrely about it, then I drop it. I don't tend to push it too much. I don't know of anyone else that's had an actual NDE. So I haven't really had a lot of experience with that. As far as I know, I'm the only person in my little circle that has had an actual NDE. They're not really all that common. You know, people would have you believe that like half the population has had these, and it's really not. But people have all kinds of other, you know, supposed supernatural experiences. So these are just feelings. You know, we all get feelings. And I just tend to ask people, you know, well, how do you know that's God? I mean, how would you, you know, why do you believe that?
It's a really great question. I think that's the key one to ask. Yeah, I always wonder how much stock theists have in those kinds of near-death experiences. I know in the US, there was that really massively popular book, I think it was called Heaven is for Real, where it was just sharing the story of like a child who had gone through a near-death experience. And I hear it get mentioned quite often. So I do wonder, how much do people, when they're thinking about their own faith, do they feel like, well, there's all these near-death experiences, people seeing the white light and all that. And how much of it is it just like a secondary thing where they just believe anyway, and then this is just something that comforts them that they're already right?
Right. Confirmation bias. Yeah, for sure.
Exactly, yeah.
For sure. I mean,
all right. Yeah, with that, I think we're gonna move on to some other calls. I appreciate you bringing your story, and really amazing that you're able to have some of these discussions with people.
Yeah, thanks for calling in, Michelle.
And good luck to you both, and take care.
Yeah, thanks. Have a good rest of your Sunday. All right, we have another caller in the queue. We're going to talk to Jeffrey, him from Pennsylvania, wanting to follow up on previous argument advocating for theism, wanting to discuss God's truth. Jeffrey, can you summarize your argument for us?
Sure can. How you doing, Dr. Ben? And hey, Secular Spirit, it's good to talk to you guys.
Hey, Jeffrey.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yep, we can hear you.
Hello.
What's your argument today?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think shout out to Annie. Shout out to Michelle as well. I disagree with Michelle with regard to the NDEs, but Annie spoke about how God is truth. And I can't really speak for her because she didn't say it specifically, but I would imagine she may have taken her cue as to why she knew that God is truth, because this is exactly the message that Jesus brought us. Hello? Am I being heard?
Yeah, we can hear
Yeah,
you.
we're just listening to your argument.
Okay, great. I was hearing a bunch of beeping in my ear.
Well,
okay.
Well, Jeffrey, I just wanted to also mention, I don't think Annie clarified that she was a Christian. Ben, you could correct me if I'm mistaken, but I don't think she mentioned Christianity or Jesus once when she was talking about God. So maybe she is Christian, maybe she isn't, I'm not sure, but I just wanted to make that point because of the point I was making earlier, that who has access to this truth of God, which religion, which faith, to me it's unclear.
We all have access to it.
So why do different people disagree about which God is correct then?
I think it's because we believe different information.
So how do you know from different religions, you mean?
Yeah, so how do you know your information is correct?
Well, this is actually the burden of, I guess, every man and woman born on the planet. They got to figure out, given their life, in their life, what is truth. You know, the thing that Pilate, I believe, asked Jesus, what is truth? This is a question we all ultimately have to answer, because there's so many lies out here and I think what's happening is, because we live in what is really a dark world and Jesus is the light of the world, we're in darkness. And so there's a lot of lies that we're born into, you know, and we see that all around us. And I think people are inundated with lies around them. And so now they have no confidence in the truth, even in this post. You might as well. I heard the term post-truth world being bantied about these days. You know, people don't even believe there is truth anymore. You see, that's how dark this world is. So when Jesus comes in and says, "I am the light of the world," we should listen to his words so that we can be enlightened and move out of this darkness that we're all in.
And for you, Jeffrey, how do you know that it is Jesus that is the truth? Like, how did you determine for yourself? I understand what you're saying about how everyone has to go through this journey and figure that out. For you personally, how did you figure out for you that this is the truth 100%, no doubt?
Good question. So I heard or I read, I was made aware of Jesus's words. And when I got an understanding of what he was saying, I obeyed, his commandments. And when I began to obey his commandments, I found confirmation of the truth, that he was, in fact, the truth. That was my own personal journey.
What was that confirmation? Like, what did it look like?
There is peace in the confirmation. There is mutual joy, mutual love between people that I interact with. There is increased understanding of the things that are going on around me, things that I perhaps before hearing or getting that understanding, I was perplexed by. And I just felt like I was in that darkness that I was, but as the Spirit of God began to minister to my mind and begin to reveal the truth, it gives you peace. It gives you a certain confidence, and people take that confidence as being arrogance. Well, I can't really be apologetic for my confidence. I mean, it's just something that I'm experiencing. People can call it confirmation bias, and that's usually what happens. But I guess we all have confirmation bias. But
we do. So Jeffrey, sorry if I interrupt. I just have a question for you, just about the inner peace you felt, in yourself when you accepted Jesus. The thing that I find is, so my background is Muslim. I used to be Muslim. And I remember when I was a practicing Muslim that I had those feelings too. Like I had the feeling of inner peace and, certainty that this is the truth. But for Muslims, they don't believe that Jesus is the Son of God, for example. They believe that he was a very important prophet of God, but they don't have that same belief about him being the Son of God and part of the Trinity, for example. So my question to you is, I had that inner peace, that certainty, but I didn't have the same beliefs about Jesus that you do. So can you see why I bring that up? Because there might be more than one pathway to attaining confirmation of one's faith beyond just your belief in Jesus.
I think to the extent that Islam hits on any type of truths, and if you encountered those truths while you were in Islam and you embraced those truths, I think that's the source of your peace. See, the peace that I'm talking about can only come from truth. It's exclusive, it's holy, it's set apart. But it exists in a lot of things that people don't realize that it does exist in. Don't get me wrong, but you have to investigate things. And when you encounter truth, one of the things that it does do is it does bring peace, excuse me.
But you see my point, Jeffrey, when it comes to me, let's say when I was a Muslim, I did not accept Jesus as my savior. I didn't accept the Christian version of Jesus as the truth. So in that sense, I was rejecting the truth of Jesus, wasn't I? And for a Muslim who will look at a Christian saying that Jesus is the Son of God, a Muslim would see that as blasphemy. And so in that sense, going against the truth. And so the thing I get stuck on is, I totally respect your believe that it's really important that you get those things like inner peace from your certainty about Jesus. But how do we know it's actually the truth when there's so many people with varying claims about this truth?
Well, I think that one of the things in my faith tradition, a popular saying is, well, not a saying, it's a scripture. I just forget where it's at. It says, "Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good." So there is an experience in the tasting, that's just using a word there, tasting. In other words, when we interact, because we're interacting, we believe, with an actual mind, a person who we hold as the creator of all things. So we can interact with this person. And when we experience the goodness, and I should have mentioned that as the other confirmation, not only the peace, but the goodness that I not only felt, but, walked in and exist in, whenever I experienced goodness in my life, these were manifestations of the God who said and declared that he was good. In fact, he actually declared only he is good, and the goodness kind of just flows through all of us as we stand in agreement with what he says. So we share in that goodness, but that is also a confirmation.
So I have some questions. Is it possible for people to find peace in something that is not good and not true?
No, I would say absolutely not.
How do you know that? If somebody says that they are at peace, if someone says that they're at peace because of something that they believe is holy, would you push back on that?
Well, I just happen to know that inherently a lie, something that's not true, right? It can't produce goodness.
Yeah, but sometimes those things cause people the same inner peace that they cause to other religious people. An example I'm going to go to are people whose children die from refusing blood transfusions. These kids are martyred Like they're considered martyrs by the Jehovah's Witnesses because they bravely accepted the rules of their faith and denied life-saving treatment because of what they believed. And that thing gives people peace. It gives people who believe that peace that their family member made the right choice in their eyes. So if this knowledge of truth comes from, the feelings of peace and all that, would you push back against this particular belief? And if so, does that feeling then not necessarily indicate that something is true or good?
Not only the feeling. I wouldn't just focus on strictly the feeling and that particular thing specific example that you gave. Because they got peace about it doesn't mean that was good. I have to refer.
So then how do we define goodness?
You define goodness, you have to judge a tree by its fruit, the fruit that is manifested. And I wouldn't just go with the parents' peace about it and say, oh, that's a good thing. No, I would say that, first of all, I'm very close to that particular thing that you, that particular incident or example that you gave, because I have Jehovah's Witnesses in my family. But I am not a Jehovah's Witness, and that is because I investigated and found that the scripture that they're basing that whole refusal to take blood transfusion is faulty. I discerned the darkness. Okay. I discerned the lie, right? And
so how did you determine, if you're able to determine the lies from their religion, how did you go about approaching yours? How did you find out that your faith is true and that you're adhering to true things and not false things?
Yeah, I had answered that earlier. When the word came to me, I listened to it. I heard it, first of all. My faith.
How did you know that voice was the right voice, if you will? How did you know?
Well, first of all, the truth made itself manifest to me in the Word of God was made flesh in Jesus Christ.
What does that mean? What does that mean other than you felt that it was true?
It means that the truth was actually made flesh and dwelt among men and women. And
how do you know that? How do you did the word become flesh right in front of your eyes? And like, did Jesus sprout from the page and walk up to you, slap you on the face and say, this is the correct one? How did this happen? You're describing a lot of very vague things of like this manifested for you and like you discerned these things. I need to know if I'm going to have the same experience that you did, if I'm going to read the same book and find out that it's true, how is that process going to happen? Like, how did you have that process? And how is this going to convince me that it's true? Because I should have a similar experience, right? Like if I read the book and if it's true, and if I should just know that it's true, I should be able to replicate what you did and have the same result, right?
Yeah, you're skipping something that I said that's very important, which is not just hear the word, but when you hear the word and have faith in it, then you obey what is commanded of you. And then within the obedience, there is confirmation of the truth of the thing.
So I have to already believe it before I can believe it. Is that what you're saying?
And
so you hear it, but then you have to like, it kind of sounds like you have to hear it and then you have to already commit to it. And if you don't commit to it, then you're not going to believe it.
The faith comes from God. It's a gift of God that he gives to every man and woman who hears his word.
Yeah, except for I tried and it didn't work for me. And there are several things that I will not try. Because, a lot of the Bible tells me that I cannot be who I am. So all that being said, it sounds like you're just kind of preaching. And so if you want to call back next time, we'd be happy to address this more. But I want you to think, like, go home, think about what of your story is going to convince us. Like, what can I do other than just already believing something? Because I'm not convinced. And I was a Christian. And I was very committed, and I believed the things that I was taught. I had that sense of inner peace, like you mentioned, but I ended up not being convinced now. And so I want you to go back and kind of think through your reasoning of how you got to that. And we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Yeah.
Ben, before we jump to the next caller, I just wanted to make a point to tying into something one of the channel followers sent in about Mother Teresa being in hell. Was Mother Teresa a saint, I believe, someone who is revered by a lot of Christians, and the whole notion of you judge a tree by its fruit, like, so goodness by its fruit. And when you consider the incredible amount of suffering that she allowed to continue in her hospitals for the dying and sick, is that a good thing? Was that the path of truth, the path of Jesus? And that's the thing that scares me too, is whichever religion you look at, you can see a lot of horrible examples of what this faith has led to. And so again, the question remains, what is this truth? Who has access to it? Because you can point out flaws in every direction.
Absolutely. And with that, we're going to move on to Stephen in Florida, who wants to talk about some different interpretations of the Bible. So, Stephen, can you summarize your question or comment to us?
Hey, guys. Thanks for taking my call. I first would like to bring up with what Annie said. God is not truth. You could argue that Christianity, it has 45,000 different denominations globally. So you could say it is the most divided religion known to man. Therefore, you could argue that Christianity has the less truth out of any religion due to the expansion of different divisions or denominations. If Christianity was truth, it would be reality. It would just exist. People would be able to find it without a book or a prophet or somebody trying to teach them what reality is. It would just exist. And so I did call in for a different purpose, just to bring some light onto if we took the Bible literally. But I would like to now challenge your Christian callers or your religious callers, mainly Christians that believe that Jesus died for them. What tangible proof do we have that Jesus' sacrifice even was accepted by God? The only thing we know about life, the only certainty of life, is death. And if Jesus paid the ultimate price that we owe to God, and that was Semitic death, why are we still born into a sinful world? And if you believe that, why wouldn't you be out sinning as much as possible so that Jesus' death isn't in vain?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. I kind of want to address the topic you called about, though, because I'm sure the theists in the chat can call in with their responses, but I don't want to assume their perspective on this issue without them being around. But I am very curious about your original topic, because it just seems interesting to me.
Yes, sir, absolutely. Other than Adam and Eve having 3 sons who populated the world, you find interesting stories in the Bible. Like, for instance, if we use Jesus' baptism as a reference point, 3 days after Jesus' baptism, all the apostles write that Jesus goes into the wilderness to resist the devil for 40 days. But John doesn't. John writes that this is when him and Jesus are at the wedding in Canaan. And him and Jesus are both there, along with Jesus' mother, Mary. And John never says who's actually getting married, but Jesus is having such a great time that this is when he performs his miracle of turning water into wine. Now, they would have scarce drinking water, so you can take that as you want. Jesus turning what little drinking water they had into more alcohol shouldn't really be deemed a miracle, but that story doesn't matter until we get to the Last Supper, where the beloved disciple, who the Christians will say they don't know who that was, places his head on Jesus's breast. But this could also be the disciple whom Jesus married, considering the disciples didn't know where Jesus was, all but John. Because when he's also on the cross, John writes that Jesus then entrusts his mother Mary to John in John's care. And we all know that, obviously the text tells us Jesus would have had a stepfather, Joseph. So I was telling the screener, at the point of Jesus's crucifixion, Mary would have been at least 21, 22 years old. So it's possible, given Joseph's history of liking little girls, that he just moved on to another virgin 13-year-old girl when Mary was 21. She might have just been too old for Joseph.
I don't know if I accept that interpretation because, as far as I know about Jewish culture back then, I don't think that they would have easily just let somebody move on to somebody else. I think they had some, I don't know if they were specifically laws, but they definitely had customs around like monogamy and staying with a spouse. I know that they would often like take additional wives, but I just don't know. I don't know if I have the expertise even to weigh in as much on this particular interpretation, but it's definitely interesting.
Right. I mean, it's more of a whimsical outlook because I am an atheist. So it's more of taking the Bible literally, how funny and childish the stories are. For example, of Adam and Eve having 3 sons who populated the world, and, how do we have 4 blood types that are divided into 8 groups, negative and A, B, and O, negative and positive, depending on what you inherit from your parents. This is all impossible from 2 people. And so, the Bible's refuted with basic science, but I just wanted to call and say, if we just took the stories literally, just reading the Bible, we could assume with the disciples not knowing where Jesus is in the story, except for John, and with John giving Mary, his mother, on the cross, I mean, you could assume that he was the beloved disciple that the Christians are always saying that nobody knows who that was.
Yeah. Secular Spirit, any thoughts?
I always wonder about this kind of thing with the Bible. So obviously I'm an outsider, having grown up a Muslim, so I'm not that familiar with the Bible. But what really stands out to me is the sheer number of contradictions and variations and details of Jesus's life. And what's most interesting to me about it is when we're talking about literal truth, the ways that a lot of Christian apologists get around it, where, sometimes you just have to engage the text and interpret it, and the truth will come to you. All of them were accessing the truth, but from different angles and perspectives, but it's still the truth. So what matters in the end is whether it's literal truth, metaphorical truth, allegorical truth, whatever you want to call it. The Christian is stuck having to believe that it's true, or it was true at some point, or that there's an essence of truth through it. So I think it's reached a point where 2,000 years later, no matter what you throw at them, what you throw at Christians, they'll find some kind of way to justify their belief in the Bible. And I don't know what the solution is to tackle that beyond asking for critical thinking and reason, and to look at it with an actual open mind, not through the confirmation bias of belief.
Yeah.
Exactly. Read a different book.
Oh,
yeah, definitely.
There are those Christians who are like, I only have one book, and that's the only book I need, right?
And most of them don't even read it themselves. They pay somebody to interpret it for them. And You know, and then when you this weekend, I told my aunt the story of Lot, and she didn't even know that Lot was in the Bible. And I was like, well, that's a big character in the Bible to not know.
Yeah, especially some of the unsavory parts of the story of Lot, and afterwards with his 2 daughters. There's stories like that where I don't really know what you're supposed to take away from them. Are they just there for you to just kind of be awestruck? Are there morals you're supposed to take from it? Because it's scary if you do take it that way as a moral lesson.
Exactly, sir, because the moral lesson that I got out of that I take away, is that God justifies incest with the first family having 3 sons. They either have sex with the mother or with the daughters that the Bible doesn't say Adam and Eve had. And then we get a story of Sodom and Gomorrah where the same deity kills all these homosexuals. And this problem-solving, all-loving deity is about to kill the entire world in almost no time in the grand scheme of time, with an entire flood. But he has to let you know how much he hates homosexuals specifically before killing the rest of the world. So, if we're looking for things in the Bible, from the first few stories, we gather that no homosexuals died in Noah's flood because the deity already killed them before the flood happened.
Yeah, lots of interesting stuff, and I agree that the book isn't super reliable, and there's a lot of contradictions. We are going to move on, though, but if you have any more thoughts about this, we do have the Discord after show after this. If you would like to pop in and continue this discussion, I'm sure we have lots of people in the Discord that'd be happy to have a group discussion about this as well. So thank you for calling in, and
I listen to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen.
All right. And for those that weren't able to get on the show today, I know we had a couple callers still in the queue, but I want to encourage you to also join us in the Discord for the after show, because I think that those questions were really good for a group discussion setting. And I really hope you join us in a few minutes, because we will prioritize your questions if we see you in there. How did you enjoy today's show, Secular Spirit?
Oh, it was really fun. Like, it really flew by, didn't it? Yeah. I think that there were a lot of really core important questions to theists, and that explore the reasons why a lot of people believe in God. And they're really, really important. And I'm kind of glad that we kind of covered a lot of them, like near-death experiences. Where do we come from? What happens after death? Where does truth come from? So yeah, really, really good stuff to discuss.
Yeah, it was a great show. A lot of variety, a lot of good calls. And I hope some of these people call back so we can continue our discussions here. But just a reminder for the audience today, we have our Talk Heathen to Me question of what would Jesus tweet? And I think we need to make those bracelets from the 80s or whatever, the what would Jesus do bracelets, but what would Jesus tweet is now a thing. So get your answers in the comments and tune into the next week's show where we read the top 3 answers, because yours might be chosen. And we want to thank Richard Gilliver for helping out today as our backup host. He was very kindly sitting backstage, telling us all the things that he thinks about the variety of calls that we had. And we got to see his lovely facial expressions as he was fuming with a few different things. I just love when I get to respond to philosophy questions and he doesn't, and he just gets to sit in the back and watch me respond to philosophy questions.
I'm not going to lie, that was the first 2 calls, in fact. I was kind of saying this is right on my street. I so wish I was hosting this week. It's great to get a philosophy one where it's not just people shouting at you and telling you that your grounding of being is wrong. Anyway, so that'd have been that first call was great for that. But I love the beginning of the universe calls. That's kind of my wheelhouse as well. So those first 2 calls, as particularly, I was really like chomping at the bit, shouting at the screen, typing madly and chatting all that other great stuff. I just want to thank Secular Spirit for coming on to the show. It's been great having you along.
Thank you for having me, Richard.
Yes, and please tell us. I know you talked to us about at the beginning about what you do, but please remind the audience who you are, where they can find you, and hear more about your story.
Sure. I mean, I'm an ex-Muslim, now atheist YouTuber. You can find me on Secular Spirit on YouTube. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram. I talk about organized religion in general, although my focus is on Islam. I am starting to cover Christianity a bit more in the recent months. I'm going to continue to do so. And I just want to explore where we get our answers for life's biggest questions from, and potentially maybe secular ways of getting those answers and meaning in our lives.
Awesome. Love to hear it. Everybody go watch Secular Spirit's channel. I will be doing that as well. I will be going and liking and subscribing, turning on notifications, all the things that you should also be doing with this channel, like I mentioned before. But let's throw out some love rings to our audience. Magic. And again, we have our Discord after show for anyone that wants to continue the discussion about anything that we've talked about today, or if you have a new question or comment you'd like to mention, that is tiny.cc/ACD Discord. If you're not there yet, if you don't believe, this is your community. We love having all of you here, providing a safe, secular space for all of you, especially those of you who have maybe had to be around religious family over the weekend and just need a little break. We're happy to be here for you. If you do believe, we don't hate you. We're just not convinced. Bye, everyone.
We want the truth, so watch Truth Wanted live Friday at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTW and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/calltw.